right, welcome everybody. We'll go ahead and get started so that everybody can get to lunch and be on your way. My name is Lance Yoder, and I work at Cerner Corporation. We're going to do some very brief introductions, and then we're going to get into our presentation, which includes live demo of how we're using Yammer, SharePoint, and Teams today. So we've tried to time it out so we have some questions at the end as well. So if you have a question, we'd kind of appreciate it if you could hold it till the end, unless it's like we're falling off the stage or something, but we don't anticipate that happening. So as I said, I'm Lance. I manage a team at Cerner we call a workforce adoption team. We have a responsibility for community management of our Yammer groups and SharePoint sites at Cerner, as well as overall adoption and engagement around specific technologies, including Office 365.
Hey, my name is John Moore. I'm a senior technology architect with Cerner. My team is responsible for our end user technologies. So Office 365 being one of those. We own and manage the platform as like the global administrators. We own change control and things like that, as well as do a lot to drive adoption in the investment we've made with Office 365.
And I'm David Kendrick. I manage a development team. Our team name is Workforce Collaboration. We manage development for some on-premise SharePoint environments, as well as SharePoint Online, our Intranet, and some other custom .NET oriented web applications.
All right, we'll get started. We'll spend a very brief time and a little bit of background. You didn't come here to learn about what Cerner is specifically, but we do want you to understand the context of kind of how we made some of our decisions and what we're doing today. So we'll spend just a little bit of time on that, but then we'll really spend some time talking about a migration that we made from an enterprise collaboration platform into Office 365, and specifically around how we handled change management there. How we handled some custom software development that we saw as value add to the process. And John will be taking you through a demo of how we kind of put all these things together today. So hopefully that will be illuminating for you. So really quick on Cerner, if you can, the key things to take away from this, we have about 29,000 people. About half of them are in Kansas City, Missouri. The other half are spread across the globe. We're in approximately 30 countries, large offices outside of Kansas City in Malvern, Pennsylvania, India, the UK, and Germany, with smaller offices dispersed elsewhere around the globe. We are a healthcare IT company, so we make electronic medical records, but also a lot of other things that impact really every area of healthcare. We're annual revenue of approaching $5 billion, so that orients you a little bit to what we're about and kind of the problem that we were trying to deal with. You're not probably too interested in our mission and vision, but here it is, and these slides are available. So really our mission is to really transform healthcare using IT. So a little bit about how we embarked on our journey. At Cerner, we have a long history of collaboration. Back in about 2008, there was a book written called Wikinomics. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but it was basically talking about the power of mass collaboration. And Cerner thought, yeah, that's what we need to do to continue to innovate and share information and get people across the company communicating with one another at a more rapid way, to share ideas and shorten the time from an idea to actual innovation. And we saw enterprise social collaboration as a way to achieve that. So over the period of 9 years, we were a longtime Jive customer, and just in the 12 months prior to migrating to Office 365, we had approximately 99% of our associates were active on the platform. We had a bunch of them receiving email notifications for things going on. We had a total of 47 million activities and 33 million page views. So we had a robust enterprise social platform. Oh, and by the way, in the day after Teams was made available beta, just with really no marketing efforts, just our associates adopting it, teams. There are already 7,000 Microsoft Teams existing in our tenant. So we had that at the same time. So our approach, what we did, this is our approach to change management. We saw getting into Office 365 as really kind of fundamental to changing and creating our future vision of the intranet. We saw collaboration as a key piece of that. So we partnered with other organizations inside of Cerner. I don't know if David and John and I explained it specifically, but we are part of the shared services engineering team at Cerner, which is internal IT. So we did not want this to be a total business-led initiative. So we partnered with our stakeholders in HR, as well as internal communications and marketing, primarily, with some other secondary stakeholders in our other large organizations. And we kind of broke the work down around change management. And while there was a specific technology and development component to this, this was by and large a change project. Don't want to downplay the technology and the development aspects of it, but it was a large change undertaking. So the areas we determined that were really important: development, obviously, communications and change. How are our associates receiving information about what we're going to do? Design and architecture. What was the experience going to be like for associates? Training. What do we need to provide to them? What were the use cases that we needed to account for? With 30,000 associates, you can't provide training that is going to fit every single user case, but which would we target to get the most influence? Governance. Who could do what and when? How do you untangle that question? And of course, the migration itself. What will we need to do to get any data that needed to come from our old Jive platform into Office 365? How are we going to make that happen? So what we did was we broke the different people working on the project into different teams, and we would have a weekly meeting where every representative of the various work streams would get together and give an update on what we'd done. And in between then, those times where we would come together, the individual work streams were empowered to make decisions and do things on their own. So along the lanes that we showed you, on the development team, that was shared services engineering. We owned that. We were driving that. Design and architecture, we had some enterprise architecture, enterprise design resources that were assigned to the project. We had our internal comms people. We had 2 people from HR involved in that, as well as an architect from the shared services engineering team. For the communications and change management side, 1 representative from our organization, 1 from HR, and 1 from internal communications. On the training side, 2 folks from HR who had specialized in associate learning. We had a member of our team that was involved in that, and then we have an organizational change management team that within our shared services engineering organization that is responsible for overall change management, and they were involved in this as well. For governance, obviously internal comms, representative from our organization, and HR. And then the actual migration itself, it was mostly shared services engineering, but we also involved HR in that, just for the impact that it would have to associates. I'm going to turn it over to David now. He's going to take you through some timelines and development work that we did.
Yep, so from our overall timeline perspective, we actually started having discussions springtime of last year in the March and April timeframe, just putting together some preliminary plans, kind of determining what our scope was and who we need to engage to kind of to define those groups that Lance just went over. But when it came down to it, we actually started executing on the plan in the August timeframe, and we ended up completing by February. So it wasn't a terribly long process, even though we had to cover the 99% of our associate base, cover the 30,000 people in 30 different countries, because we ended up taking enough time at the beginning to really kind of work out the plan and strategize, determine the communications that needed to occur. It helped us be successful throughout. We also, as kind of shown here on the timeline, kind of broke this out into different pieces. And so, you know, that first August, September timeframe, we really started trying to communicate early on to the organizations that were most affected, that it affected their business processes the most, letting them know that change was coming, to let them start go down the process of figuring out what that really meant to them, so they could take that and communicate to their organizations as well. We didn't want to communicate just at the end of the process, knowing that would have led to a lot of dissatisfaction and a lot more struggle. So we told them early that we're going to be doing this, kind of told them our rough plan, and then we followed that up with communications throughout the process to let them know as we had fully defined some of the details, and just to continue that relationship building that we'd done. And then we had a couple of different phases from a migration perspective. Phase one was targeted at the communities that used our previous collaboration platform that we kind of considered to be, we've termed it structured versus unstructured. So we consider this more of the unstructured collaborative experiences that were managed by the community owners. Where with that phase one migration, it was largely more of a manual migration, and we wanted the community owners, to go in, determine what content that they'd had that was created sometime in the last 10 years, 9 years, some of which probably no longer relevant. In some cases it was, but there was, as you can imagine, over that length of time, there's a lot of documentation or conversations that are no longer needed to move into the future platform. So those organizations kind of assigned who within those organizations would take control of determining what did migrate. Fortunately, many of them already had community owners assigned. Lance's team and John and some of our other teams worked with them to really talk through the process. And so we opened up the tool. We turned on Yammer right at the end of August, but we didn't communicate it to anyone until following Labor Day, so really at the early parts of September, when we fully communicated that we had enabled Yammer for everybody. So that was kind of our last remaining piece. As Lance had mentioned, we already had Teams turned on. We already had SharePoint Online sites that we had been using, but Yammer was our final component that we really needed to get enabled and figure out the process for. So leading up to that, throughout the summer months, we really worked to define what the use cases were that we were going to leverage Yammer for, versus when do we use Teams and when do we recommend people who have just a structured standalone SharePoint site. So in that September timeframe, once Yammer became available, we had the early adopters, those folks who wanted to volunteer to jump into Yammer right away. We got them in there right away, and then they had through February to migrate their stuff. Most of those migrations completed in 2018. We had some people that, for whatever reason, their hesitancy towards adopting the new technology, or just business projects that kept them and delayed them, that moved into the Q1 timeframe, but a large portion definitely moved over last year. So then our second phase was more of the structured content, those being organizational or department level content that our teams worked to kind of define a little bit more governance and looking what are the site designs on the SharePoint site going to look like, how are they going to interact, how they're going to build out those communication sites and leverage the capabilities. At the same time, throughout this process, we met with Microsoft folks quite regularly. We had conversations with the Yammer product team. Our customer success manager helped coordinate other discussions to making sure to validate our process was accurate, kind of met the overall plan that Microsoft envisioned as well. And so while we were going through there, and then as new features were added into our tenant throughout this process, we made sure that as we're working with these community owners and site owners, that we tried to communicate throughout as changes were happening, especially if it was a new feature that would really benefit them. So we started that process a little bit later, just to provide us enough time to fully define the overall governance. So that's why that's more of the October, February timeframe. Throughout both of those phases, it was still primarily the exact same teams that on Lance's slide were involved. It was just different focuses for us. So it kind of changed our communication methods throughout on how we went about working with those organizations. So we set forth the deadline of the end of February as when we would fully shut off our employees from using the former platform in Jive. And we kind of landed on that time frame in roughly the late spring of last year. We didn't want our date to be driven solely by an arbitrary factor of just picking a random date, throwing a dart at a dartboard, and whatever happens, as with many IT projects. Then it's a struggle to try to hit that date. We really wanted that date to be a realistic time frame. So that's why we took the time before we set the date to really kind of map out what time frame we wanted to hit. The good news is actually February, typically a big project. I'm sure folks have been involved, kind of start sweating at the end, you're thinking it is crunch time. We actually had the opposite effect happen here, where we kind of coasted in the February timeframe. We didn't have any major panics. And we didn't have a lot of complaints by that time. We definitely had people who were change averse who voiced their opinions earlier in the process, but by the time February came, our communication plan was kind of hitting on all cylinders, where we had given them, a 2-month warning, a 1-month warning, and then kind of started getting down to the weekly warnings. Hey, this is still really happening. Make sure you move over what you need. So when it came time, February 28th, when we shut off our previous system, we did it at 8 a.m. Central Time, and that particular day, we only had literally one person in the company reach out saying that they had missed the communication. So we politely pointed them to where the communications went, and he apologized for missing it, because we had e-signage up, we had physical signs up, many emails, so there was a large effort involved as far as communication. So from our perspective, it couldn't have gone any better, honestly. And part of that is our partnership with Microsoft. I mean, we truly did meet with them fairly often. Sometimes we were ahead of them and validating what we'd already figured out. Sometimes they helped guide us. So it was a really helpful process overall. Yep. So from a development perspective, my team did go ahead and create a migration tool. We did it in-house. There is at least one solution available on the market. We were looking to try to do this at low cost, and we didn't really think that it was overly expensive to spend some time on. But we also did not want to encourage to migrate all 10 years worth of content. So as we kind of proceeded down here, I already mentioned with the phase one, we encouraged people to manually migrate their content, manually review what they needed to ensure that they take some time, some effort to do a cleanup. There's really no better time than moving from one system to another than to take some of that opportunity. Otherwise, you're just going to keep migrating old content that nobody's ever going to read, clogs up your search results, wastes storage, and overall just provides no value. But we did have a couple of large engineering organizations that truly did have a large amount of content that they had built a knowledge base up over that 10-year period. And because that's kind of the lifeblood of Cerner, being a healthcare IT company, we wanted to make sure we didn't disrupt any of their business processes. So that's why kind of the primary driver of developing a migration tool. It was pretty basic. We had a web application user interface that we could end up searching for the content in Jive by a variety of criteria, using the REST APIs, pull that content out, using CSOM APIs to push the data in on the Office 365 space. We actually kind of played around and iterated a little bit on how we wanted that process to work. When it came to conversations, we explored the idea of migrating into Yammer, those conversations. We ultimately decided not to do that. We got that functioning fine. There was a couple of reasons why we moved away from that. For one, over that 10-year period, not everybody that had previously were involved in a conversation in Jive or in the threaded replies, they may not have worked at Cerner any longer, which then was a challenge because then you'd lose some of that context of who that initial reply came from, and then we would have to embed some extra metadata into the reply itself. And then we also went away from that idea because of the date time. It would lose the historical context of when that conversation was had, all the replies as well, because it would have just had that current date of the migration instead. So again, we would have been forced to put in some extra details into the conversation, and we just didn't ultimately like the experience of what that would have looked like. So instead we opted for those discussions. We converted them to PDF and then just stored those as historical documents on a SharePoint document library. Each of the sites that we migrated to, if the users already had an existing site, we let them tell us that, and we would migrate it to their site, putting it in the foldering respective to the migration. If they didn't have a site, then our migration tool would provision one and then migrate the content. Within Jive, we also had a large number of videos that had been created over the years that we migrated as well. We put those in a separate folder within the SharePoint document library. And then Jive also had a bunch of documents and attachments. If we brought those over and kept the original attachment file type, so if it was an Excel document or a Word doc, moving that over to SharePoint, obviously that's going to open up natively with no issues. And then since we didn't pull the trigger and just hit the go button and migrate all content, we had a total of about 1.5 million items that were eligible for migration from Jive. And since we limited the scope to only specific orgs or special requests with business justification, we reduced our overall content that was collaborative down by 83%. So we only migrated a little over 260,000 items out of that 1.5 million, so 17%. I would be willing to bet that of that, we probably could have chopped off another 10 to 12%, but at least it was a significant reduction, just reduces the overall clutter and makes it easier for people to find their information. We also developed a few other things to kind of help people through this process and going forward. So some of this is more for going forward. So we developed a web application to allow people, if they didn't have access to their original video files that they'd uploaded to Jive, but wanted to manually migrate that, we developed a web page. Otherwise, it is administrative only capability. So we allowed them to easily pull videos that they were allowed to do if they owned a community or it was a video that they had previously uploaded themselves. They could download that and then choose what SharePoint site to put that to. And then we developed the screenshot to the right of here as an example. We developed a custom web page that allows people to search for existing groups. If they're wanting to go create a new one, we encourage them to search first, see if there's already a group out there that is named similarly to what they want, because maybe we don't want to create duplication where possible. So we let them search, find out if there is a group or not. If there isn't, then it's kind of a form-based questionnaire asking them what their purpose is, who's their intended audience, how many people are they trying to target. At the time, it was when teams had a 2,500 associate limit. I know that's increased. So that was kind of put out there really to walk people through. And at the end of that, once they've answered all the questions, it would give them the suggestion. It sounds like you need a team. Obviously with team, it will provision Office 365 group, which will then provision a SharePoint site, or it will tell them that they need a Yammer group and provision either one, whichever was appropriate. If it comes out they needed an organization-only communication site, they didn't need the collaboration capabilities, then we actually turned off the site self-service capability to create a standalone SharePoint site. We redirect them to another form to request a SharePoint only site, so that it gives us an opportunity to engage and collaborate with them to figure out, making sure that they've thought through, do they need those collaboration capabilities in the future or not? If they don't, then we will provision a SharePoint site for them. So with that, I'll turn it over to John to talk about some of our configuration.
Right. Cool. So we started this process and all the planning in March. As other IT admins in the room might imagine, by August, my leg was bouncing too much to get ready to actually click some buttons, get this thing turned on. So when we set out to turn on Yammer for the first time, we did what you might expect. We performed the initial configuration. Corporate branding was right up there in front and center. Got to get your Cerner logo up there, got to have the branding the right way, the right colors. We chose to look at our external network settings and had a philosophical discussion about, is Yammer going to be externally facing or internal facing? We've decided that this is our strategy for associate-only collaboration. So we leave our external network settings set to where associates cannot create external networks. It's internal only. They can join other external networks with an administrator's permission. They send a request. That request is approved. For example, some of us are in external networks for healthcare with Microsoft and other Microsoft customers. Then we had to perform a network consolidation. Cerner, like other large enterprises, has made several acquisitions over the years, and we had about 30 Yammer networks that we needed to consolidate. That was very easy to do within Yammer admin settings. We selected all those. We consolidated them into our main tenant domain, which is cerner.net. That's what we use to log in, where our user principal names are. And then it was time to talk about security. We have two mantras at Cerner on security. First is secure from the start. Security in a healthcare organization is at the beginning of every single project. They're always up front and center. The second mantra is security built in, not bolted on. What capabilities are built into the platform that offer security so that you don't have to tie on things to the solution? With Yammer, there was a few things that were built in, not bolted on. The first is enforcing the Office 365 identity. In those admin settings, we turn on the enforcement of that identity because that gives us the ability to have associates log in as themselves. They only have access to Yammer as long as they work at Cerner. When they no longer work at Cerner, they are disabled from the tenant, they can no longer log into Yammer. Obviously, you want that in a social networking environment at a large enterprise scale. You don't want something posted after someone no longer works with you. Another thing we did when we enforced the Office 365 identity is this enabled the creation of Office 365 groups. Every Yammer group that gets created, when you have that checkbox checked, every group that gets created creates an Office 365 group. So you get a SharePoint, you get a Stream group, you get a Plan and Planner, and other goodies in Office 365. So we had to educate on that, and we'll go over the education in the next slide here. Then when we think about admin roles in a large organization, we always want to have role-based separation of our admin accounts. So all of our admins have separate accounts with extra multi-factor authentication so that, the administrators, while they are very trusted individuals, they don't have the power to go into content management mode where they can see the private conversations, things like that. They have to fully log into another instance with another account in order to gain those privileges. So you don't have people walking around with more access than they need. That's very important for us. And then finally, we downloaded a naughty word list off of Tech Community. Had about 700 words on it. It expanded my vocabulary greatly. And we put that into the monitored keyword field in the admin settings. That is set up so that it alerts a distribution list if a certain word is uttered or a certain pattern, like a social security number or credit card number. Those patterns get matched, and those will send those to the Yammer administrators. And then we had to tackle our approach to group creation. This is a controversial issue. Do you let your users create their own groups, or do you ask them, do they have to go ask someone for permission to have their group created for them? Because we enforce the Office 365 identity, because you log in with that and it creates a group, we chose this path for a technical reason. We allow all of our users to be able to create groups fully democratized. Anybody can create a group, a team, or a Yammer group. We literally use the graphic from Ratatouille. Anyone can cook. Anybody can spin up what they need, get their job done, and collaborate. Now, the reason for this is the technical reason when you check that box to allow Office 365 group creation, but then if you go into the tenant and you turn off group creation at like the Office 365 admin settings, that does not disable their ability to create a Yammer group. They can't create a team. They can't go into Outlook and create a group in Outlook, but in Yammer they can still create a group. What it does is it creates a group that is not an Office 365 group. We felt that that would lead to confusion because we didn't need any more of this flow chart of if you click a button here, you get a different result. We wanted that consistency across the board. If you click the new button in Teams, you get a group. New button in Yammer, you get a group. It's the same. It's easier to communicate that. So we got it all turned on. I went home feeling really good about myself. And then the next morning you get that email from your director as the IT administrator that says, hey, I noticed something in the pilot. That something that he noticed was that #join gets added every time a new person logs into the Yammer network. It posts, so-and-so has #joined Cerner Corporation. Why don't you welcome them? Why don't you say hello? That might be great in smaller companies. That might be great for groups who this is their first foray into social networking. For Cerner, that was an annoyance because we have 9 years of social networking under our belt. We wanted to get rid of that. So how do we get rid of that? We could have spun up a big development effort. We could have built tools and things like that. But for us, Flow came to the rescue. What we did is we found a blog, like many of us IT administrators do. You start Googling, you find a blog out there, and we created a flow. That flow is run by a service account. So we have a service account that is watching for messages in all company. It is triggered whenever that message contains #joined the Cerner Corporation network. If that is found, then it creates a HTTP call. So we tap into the Yammer API and we just delete that message. So it would show up for a little bit of time and then it would be removed. We had no complaints about, hey, what's this #joined? It just went away. And then we learned something that our partners at Microsoft didn't know yet, which is that when you have that #join message, once your network hits 1,000 members, it stops posting that #join. So this is only a temporary annoyance, if I can use the word annoyance. It was temporary for us. Within actually a few weeks, we had gone way past 1,000 members in our network, and we didn't need the flow anymore. But if you download these slides, I have pasted a link in the notes for this slide to that blog post. It tells you step by step how to create that flow if you want to get rid of #joined. Our next challenge was what to use when. How many folks have this problem where you don't know when to use Teams versus Yammer? How do you communicate that? You guys have Teams and Yammer turned on in your environment? Awesome. You're my people. We realized this, or we encountered this before Microsoft had their great graphics for inner loop and outer loop. There's a wealth of information now. Regarding 365.com, they have a great what to use when umbrella. That has too many icons on it for us, frankly. There are too many applications on it. We needed to simplify. So we developed this graphic ourselves, and we thought of it rather than an inner loop, outer loop, because that didn't exist yet. We thought of it like a cross-section of the Earth. If we all think back to several years ago in school, if you cut the Earth in half, you've got the core and you've got moving out from there. We explained it this way, and this is our e-signage that we had splashed everywhere around Cerner to explain this. OneDrive, that is my individual work-related files. This is where I'm working on my stuff only. The most private of my work stuff is OneDrive. Moving out from that is my Microsoft team. These are the people that I work with regularly. Operative word, with. I know these people. I work with them regularly on a project. If it's cross-organizational, it's a project where you have HR, internal comms, and shared services. Or it's my actual team organizationally. It's everybody under my manager. I know these people. Yammer, that's who I work around or I share a common interest with. So I may not know these people, but we went to the same university. Boom, alumni group on Yammer. We're all interested in classic cars or Nintendo. There's a Nintendo group that I'm a member of. We talk about Nintendo. These people are all over the globe, thousands of people. That's Yammer, people I share a common interest with. SharePoint, you can still create a standalone communication site. That is for information that you want to share with a large group or everyone in your organization. That's SharePoint without the rest of the Office 365 groups. So that's how we explain like our executive communications SharePoint. It doesn't need a planner. It doesn't need things like that. So it is a communication site where we broadcast a message broadly. And then it may shock Microsoft in the room to realize that we don't use only Microsoft tools. We have a third-party wiki solution, and we wanted to make it clear that that solution is still the place where you need to store information that is governed, audited, needs to be controlled, operating in the healthcare space. We have FDA regulations that we adhere to. That is where that information lives, and that is the furthest out, the most broad of our information. So feel free to steal that graphic and use it internally, if you will. So, and then our ongoing challenge. The work is not done, it is never done. That is keeping the momentum. How do we stay apprised of all of the changes that are happening in Office 365? How do we explain what's going on and how to use these tools? We've developed a three-pronged approach. The first is our Mastering Office 365 courses. We've developed in-house courses on how to use Teams, Yammer, SharePoint, and Flow. So we teach them what it is, how to use it. We actually developed labs where everybody in the room makes their first team. And then they own that team, they administer that team, and then it can be deleted after, no problem. An important point here is that it is taught by our technical experts that manage the platform. So 2 years ago, there's no way I would have gotten on stage and presented. I've gotten much more comfortable as an IT administrator and being in front of people, but I feel that it is important to have the technical experts as part of our job now to explain the technology that we deliver to our employees and associates. Reasons for this, who better to explain how this stuff works than the guy who configured it, or the girl who configured it. It cuts down on our service requests, to be frank. We do get a lot of questions in those classes. It creates a good feedback loop for us because we get to hear what the real people using these solutions who don't live it all day long, we get to hear what their feedback is on the solution, and we can provide that to Microsoft. We get to hear what their struggles are and adjust our classes accordingly. And then we get to teach them the things that we want them to know. We get to teach them those best practices so that they don't have to find out at the help desk. Over 1,500 associates have attended our classes, and we've pulled the Office 365 usage reports. And of those people who have attended one of our classes, they use the Office 365 tools 50% more than associates that have not taken one of our classes. So they are effective, they're worth it, we're recording them, and we're developing even more of them because it's been successful. Communities, we have spun up communities because we can only teach so many people at a time. Can't go to everybody's desk, so we've created Yammer communities that are open and public at Cerner. Office 365 at Cerner, this is my community of a few thousand folks where I share important updates to Office 365. People ask questions using the new Q&A feature in Yammer, and we get those questions answered for folks, and a community has built up where people are helping each other. When people are helping each other, you identify your champions. Yep. So we've picked those people who have bubbled up as champions and experts in Office 365. We wrapped our arms around them and made them our champions community. We provide early access to things in a targeted role within our tenant. We give them special previews to things that have been announced, but we haven't talked about to the broad audience. We give them an inside look at what we're doing. And because of that, they amplify our message for us. And then we're a technical company. We have a lot of engineering folks, and we've really championed our citizen developers in our Power Platform resources community. We've taken Flow, Power Apps, Power BI, and no one has the time to make everybody's flow for them. So we've created a community where that they can help themselves. We've created a SharePoint site for this community where people can submit a flow that they think is cool and useful. We let them write a news post about it, and if we think it's cool and useful as well, we publish that for them, and then they can share what they did in Flow and help somebody else out. That includes a zip file where the person can download the flow and import it into their environment and have a jump start on what they're working on. And then Lance's community is our community owners. Mm-hmm. We've identified everybody who owns other Yammer communities around Cerner, and we provide updates that are specific to how web parks work in SharePoint. SharePoint updates, Yammer updates at the platform level. And then for our champions, we do regular communications about updates. I record Teams Tip Tuesday videos. They're not every week, they're not every single Tuesday, but they're always published on a Tuesday. And they're just quick tips that are less than 2 minutes in length of something that I think is cool in Microsoft Teams. It's a quick, hey, did you know you could set Do Not Disturb? Here's how it works in Teams, and then I'm out. Just a 2-minute video. We post those, we get a lot of engagement to kind of share little nuggets of information. And as an IT administrator, it gives me practice in Microsoft Stream. Now I can answer questions about Microsoft Stream. Another way to learn about Stream is hosting live events. We host our own monthly live events, and this is how we communicate things that are in the admin message center to our associates. Hey, this is coming up in Office 365. You should be aware of this. Here's a new feature. I'm going to do a demo. We use live events in Yammer, powered by OBS. We're doing external encoding. Now I know how it works, so inevitably when someone wants to do a town hall, we know how the technology works. It's important to use this technology as an IT administrator. So to talk about some of the results, I'm going to turn it back over to Lance.
So you guys can see I work with some smart folks who make driving change and adoption of these technologies a lot of fun. But so what happened? How did we do? This is just a graph showing our usage on Yammer. I mean, it was going to grow. When you start from zero, it's kind of like the joke when people claim to be the fastest growing company in a particular field. It oftentimes just means they were the smallest, so they had the most room to grow. But aside from that, the usage and adoption by our associates in Yammer has been exponential. It's continued to drive up as associates kind of understand more how all the tools work together and can see how all the Office 365 tool set matches. There's not a magic number that we're aiming at. It's just it's great to see. We anticipate that we are able to drive out more value out of Yammer now that you need to have a good percentage of your associates in the item to actually drive further value out of it. Like John mentions, town halls, live events that we think are maybe a good opportunity. Well, the first step is associates knowing that Yammer is a thing and understanding how they can engage on that. So then when we drive even more engaging experiences there with like town hall events, they're going to be just familiar with the platform. The next couple slides, just so as we were going through the migration, we set a goal. We wanted to see that Jive, that was called USERN. We wanted to see that usage by our associates go down as our uptick in the Office 365 products trended up, and that's what we saw. SharePoint activities passed USERN during the migration phase, and Yammer, the blue line, we saw a steady creep up in the months leading up to the end of 2018. And then as we hit the migration, we could see the Yammer migration really spiked. The Yammer usage really spiked at the beginning of 2019 once we were kind of past the individual kind of getting used to it, and as more and more groups, community owners got over into Yammer, then they brought their followers with them, and so as a result we see greater Yammer usage. We did see a spike up in the month right before the official shutdown of our old platform as people kind of made a last call into there to get things out, as well as we had the new CEO publish his final blog on the old platform that drove some high usage numbers. All right, we're going to go into a demo now. Trying to do a quick time check. It's 12:15. We'll try to go through this demo. If you have questions, as John is demoing how we use Teams, SharePoint, and Yammer all together, you can go ahead and ask them, and we're more than willing to stick around afterward too.
Sure, just for a couple minutes, if you want to start taking pictures of how we as an IT organization organize our team, this is how we manage and get Office 365 done. I wanted to show you what we do. This is a good time to let you know we live in Teams all day long. Teams is my hub for teamwork, so it is basically my operating system for collaboration. This is my team where we manage Office 365 collab and apps, and it is full of connectors. We have connectors to Twitter. Ann Michaels, if you don't know her, is an important part of the Microsoft Teams team. So she posts important updates and cool tips and tricks about Teams. We have those go right into our feed. Another thing that we have leveraged, now that it is available, is the Yammer connection. If you haven't seen the Yammer connection in Teams yet, this is a good one for you as an IT administrator or a community owner to use.
Yep.
You can connect to a group. The questions that pop up within that community get posted over to your team so they can react and know what they need to go engage with. To show you a little bit of that, when you enable this connector, you also have the ability to add a tab. So we have the brand new Yammer tab that goes directly to our group. This is Office 365 at Cerner, 2,200 members who are interested in the cool stuff that 365 provides for us. This is where we answer questions and where we get things done. So people can ask a question, hey, I'm having this issue. People weigh in, I'm having this issue too, or here's how I fixed it. I don't have to answer every single question. That's the power of community, right? An important a little tip here is if you're at a conference like this and you want to cut down on the amount of people bothering you while you're at that conference, I changed my name to include OOO, out of office. Or at this one I put, I'm at the SharePoint conference. So when somebody goes to try to mention me because their question wasn't answered in enough time, when they go to mention me, they see that I'm out of office and they kind of pause for a second. So on Tuesday after Memorial Day, I'll probably get a lot of mentions because I did that. But that's a little tip that we use. And then we drive people from this. Behind the scenes is the SharePoint site, and this is what our SharePoint site looks for Office 365 at Cerner. It's not going to make it in any SharePoint lookbook anytime soon, but we feel like it's got a pretty good flow here. Right front and center, we have the hero web part that says, come follow us on Yammer, takes you directly to Yammer. We have quick links. There is no way that I can blog about everything in Office 365. I'd rather point you to the Microsoft blogs. So front and center, you can get to the Yammer blog, see what the folks in Yammer are talking about. And then we drive adoption into our classes, Mastering Office 365. People can click here to sign up for one of our classes that we teach on a monthly basis. We are blogging about Office 365 and what our thoughts are about Microsoft Search or some success stories we see around the company. Those are highlighted right here, as well as our upcoming events. There's no events right now, but if we host like a lunch and learn or something like that, that gets published to our SharePoint site. Then my Teams Tip Tuesday, because I'm vain, I put that right on the homepage, and people can watch our latest 2-minute tips about Microsoft Teams, although that one's 4 minutes, so what are you gonna do? And then the Yammer Conversations, we've switched this to the new Conversations feed in the web parts. If you don't know, there's a highlights and a conversations now. We use the one that allows you to see more, so you can expand and you can see the entire conversation and reply inline without leaving SharePoint. So we switched to that. And then we have an early adopter program. If you want to be one of our champions, they can sign up for that, let us know what platform they're on, submit that, and of course we have a flow that handles the approval process for that. So at the bottom, also it's important, we feel, to put yourself out there and, you know, hey, whenever you're getting ready to yell at the team, I want you to see the humans who are behind that. We have, I clicked off of it. We have the people web part that shows who works on the team. You can identify who the people are who are providing this service for you, and we think that that's a good thing to do. So that's our demonstration of how we run Office 365, how we communicate to our community at a scale of thousands of people to get things done.
So to wrap up, we had a few items that we kind of learned throughout the process. One regarding stakeholders. As I mentioned, we met early in the process and then continued those communications with them. We have another group of people that actually called business relationship managers that are kind of responsible. They're aligned to specific business units within the company. So we leveraged working with them as well to make sure that we could get the right audience of those organizations. So we took those communications up to the executive leadership for the most part. We attended those respective orgs' town halls, and wherever they would let us come talk to this, then we went. We kind of divided and conquered in many cases, but we wanted to make sure we got to the end of this process, and for the most part, other than the one person I mentioned earlier, we didn't want anybody to complain that they hadn't heard that this was occurring. And so we were pretty successful there, and we really do attribute that largely to how often we communicated in the different forums in which we communicated. But as part of that, so when we're meeting with the stakeholders, we needed to make sure that we listened to them. We didn't just dictate solely, this is what our process is going to be, here's how we think we're solving the different use cases. So we actually took feedback from a variety of executives and whomever else they helped engage, where they felt pain points with some of our suggestions. We took that back, and then we either had conversations with some Microsoft staff, or we figured it out amongst ourselves, depending on what the issues were, and then kind of came back with a proposal that may have been completely different than what our initial proposal was. But that helped bridge the gap and show that we really are trying to help our business improve their overall processes. We're not just trying to be dictators on, here, go use this, good luck. So that was definitely a key measurement of our success. Personal blogs, blogs in general, with Cerner being so accustomed to collaboration in the past, blogs have become, in many organizations, kind of just a natural part of their everyday culture. So with that, we had to end up figuring out how, because it was different in what it was in Jive versus there are a couple of different 2 or 3 options that we could have gone down the path of. We had to figure out what worked best for them and really explain that. And for those people who like to blog on a regular basis, they had followers that they had kind of grown with. A lot of it was in the engineering space as well. So we kind of had to address that, give recommendations. We, again, didn't fully force it in one particular path. We just recommended an approach. We did get a key leader to give that a try. Kind of wanted somebody with some influence that did have followers, that their followers may also blog. So we really kind of took that approach to help gain some more adoption and give credence to the decisions we'd made. And then kind of the last things we wanted to point out. So notifications. A lot of people still live in email. I'm sure your organizations may have the same issues. So when switching them to different applications with Teams or Yammer, you don't necessarily have to rely on your email notifications, but some people really feel strongly that that's where they want to go to get their information. Whether it's seeing conversations that they're missing in Teams, they want to see that in email. If it's Yammer conversations that they're maybe missing because they haven't logged into Yammer today, they want that in their email. I mean, so we really had to figure out how best to recommend that they use those notifications, give them a method to do so, which also led to some other conversations that we've had with the product teams within Microsoft. And going through this was kind of our overall, as we put the key to the welcoming experience, we really did want to kind of welcome our associates into the new tool set, making sure that they felt that we were truly addressing how they went about their day-to-day jobs and could really make them more productive was ultimately the goal.
Cool. All right, so that's all we have. Yeah, I think we're out of time. If you have other questions, or feel free to come up as we're packing up, and we're happy to talk to you.
Thanks very much.